If I was going to ask you to define the word dynamism, how do you define it? Dynamism.
I don't know, but I think I'm pretty dynamic. I would
So
think of myself. Is there a picture of me? I'm incredibly dynamic.
correct.
You're listening to Let Me Speak to a Manager with Frank Cava and Ian Mathews.
What a crock of shit.
Yeah, that was hot mic, Sam.
It's 30 minutes away. I'll be there in 10.
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
Let's rock.
Frankie!
Ian, you son of a bitch!
Frankie, you rule-breaking son of a bitch, you are one of the craziest anarchists that I've ever met in business. I can't wait to probe your mind on just how much you break the rules on a daily basis.
So this is a conversation about breaking rules and kind of embracing technology and all kinds of different things. So speaking of breaking the rules, around here, the way that I'm breaking the rules nowadays is I'm actually writing outlines because I'm using technology. In the old days, I don't like to type. If you're looking at this on YouTube, I have humongous fingers and I fucking hate typing. I'm terrible at it, but I love voice to text. And I also like using my iPhone because I have faster my thumbs than I am my fingers. So what we've kind of gotten into is a run here where I've gotten real comfortable with ChatGPT and I really like Gemini or Grok. And those are places where if you just get kind of moving and flowing, you can send things and you can turn it in. It's your own stuff, but you have like some assistance. It's almost like a guide, right? And what comes back to you is almost like the equivalent of you get to use a red pen and mark it up because it's easier to mark stuff up than it is to create. But I think that's kind of the genesis of where we're going with this. It's rule breaking. It's figuring out how to be relevant in a world that's changing and attention spans are going. Like my 6-year-old wants to play video games and watch a movie at the same time. Like these people's brains are going kind of wacky. So we're trying to figure out like, how do you actually get a foothold into something and capture attention? And how do you use technology to do it?
There's a concept here of rule breaking, but it's also staying relevant. Had a conversation. It's sobering when you talk to other parents whose kids are similar age to my son who's going into high school, and you start talking about all of the jobs that are gonna pretty much disappear over the next decade. Like, and we were all just sitting around talking like finance, accounting, marketing, is that going to be around? What about writing? No, that's not going to be around. Engineering, that'll be around. No, like computer programming is basically getting, that's getting automated as well. And when you look at technology disrupts so often, it's not even rule breaking sometimes, it's just getting off of your own stubbornness of how things used to be and accepting reality as it is. The old Blockbuster video, right? Of it's no way people are gonna be downloading digital movies. They're always gonna want to come look at the movies, or Barnes and Noble versus Amazon, and just not embracing what customers want, what technology is bringing. And baseball is a fantastic example of this, in that the sport is as old as any sport in America. It's our oldest sport. I'd say it's still America's pastime, whether it's the most popular to watch or not. It's probably the most accessible sport when you're a young kid. Frank's got kids that are playing t-ball now. Mine did. It's an easy sport to play when you're really young, that in soccer. So just about everyone has played some bit of t-ball or something. But from a business perspective, from a financial perspective, Major League Baseball was becoming irrelevant versus the NFL. The NFL is dwarfing it in size. And Frank and I, off air, we've been talking about topics like the Savannah Bananas. We've talked about the torpedo bat. We've talked about a number of things where we're like, man, like there's a lot going on in baseball versus it used to be nothing, right? The only thing that got you talking about baseball was steroids. and guys ballooning to 250 pounds and hitting balls to the moon. That was interesting for a while.
End of the season, you usually get involved with like the playoffs, or you get excited about if somebody had a big home run total, but nobody's had a big home run total in a while. Like even Aaron Judge hit 61 a few years ago, and it was kind of like, like it didn't have enough hub.
And so the Savannah Bananas, they're owned by a guy named Jesse Cole, who he's just an interesting character. He always wears a yellow. He's kind of like a P.T. Barnum of baseball, right? He's a showman. He's always got a top hat on, and he really went after baseball in a different way, where he just wanted to take everything that made fans fall asleep. That was his thing. When he would look around, where are the moments where the fans aren't looking at the field? Where are the moments where the fans are getting up to go to the bathroom? And he attacked every one of those areas. Let me take all of that out. What's boring about baseball? What don't we like about baseball? And he created this, for those that don't know, Savannah Bananas, it's baseball, it's competitive baseball, but it's a little bit like the Harlem Globetrotters. They always play the same team, the Party Animals. So these two teams always play, but the two teams are loaded with really good former baseball players, guys that had a shot in the minor leagues, some ex-pros, but a lot of just ex-D1, really athletic, good-looking kids, but they stock the teams with personalities, people that'll be good on TikTok, people that can dance, and they make these games, I think one of the biggest innovations, it's a 2-hour time limit. That's it, right? Frank and I talk about this all the time. Did you see that movie? Did you see that? Yeah, it's about a half hour too long, right? Like people's attention spans can't go 3.5 hours watching Major League Baseball players adjust their gloves, and so they made the game shorter. They made it more interesting. There's little things like if a fan catches a ball, it counts as an out for the other team. There are all these little moments in the game that are just engaging, exciting, but the game moves. They even make the walk exciting. Like, they're sprinting, they can take an extra base on it. They have to throw it around to all 9 players. So when you walk, they throw it. If you can get to second by the time all 9 players, you get a double out of it. So like every little thing about Savannah Bananas is exciting. And I don't know if you've tried to get tickets to this, Frankie. It's impossible. Like there's auctions. You have to put your name in a hat on a wait list. They sold out Nats Park. They've sold out multiple MLB stadiums, 50,000, 40,000 people coming to see this little event. And so they took a product that, works largely. It's a pastime, but has a lot of problems that make it boring. And they just ripped all of that out, flipped it upside down, and created their own little version of it.
You really went on a Nyman rant there. All the good stuff. Good news for you. I'm not the best color man in the league for nothing. I've got some stuff to share. So what I think is interesting about Jesse Cole is he started off, he played minor league baseball. He wasn't very good. He didn't go very far. And he worked in minor league baseball, and he was at a couple of franchises that he just, using his terms, were dead. And he kind of watched what was happening with baseball, and he decided to purchase this like floundering team, and he just completely just ripped it apart and redid it. And Ian told you some of the stuff they did. But what I think is really fascinating about it is Ian kind of said it in his conversation, but I want to go back to it and kind of unpack it. He studied it. So what he did is during the on-ramp from when they were boring to what they have become, which is must-see TV, a must-see event, is he would literally audit every single part of the process from the second the fan shows up to the second the fan leaves. This includes engagement in the parking lot, their process of getting through turnstiles, everything. And then he has choreographed like 80 to 90 separate events during the course of the game to keep things moving. So like he would really pay attention to when do people look at cell phones. And when people would look down, he would write that down and he would try and figure it out. So why is this relevant to day-to-day in business? I've got a group of managers, some are younger than others, and people will monologue. And the easiest thing you need to do in a meeting, if you're running it, is if people start looking at their phones or their emails, you need to change the tone. You need to change the pace. You need to throw a curveball. You need to ask a question. You need to say, let's take a break. There's something. So what they're doing here is what you have to do in business, because everybody is just kind of overrun with stimulus, and our phone is never far away. So it can always pull you away. So I like there's kind of different relevancies of that.
All right, so I love that little piece of it. Couple of things for managers. You don't need 3-hour operating meetings. You don't need meetings where you have 12 people in it and 6 are on their phone for 75% of the meeting, not paying attention to someone who's speaking and reporting out. If you just want report outs, set up a series of one-on-ones with people who
Correct.
report to you.
Breakout.
And then you can have a more engaging dialogue that's going to be more open and more honest. So, if you find yourself the way Jesse Cole, look to the fans to see when were they disengaging from the product. You should do the same as an executive, as a manager. Look around your meeting at what
As a dad, as a husband, as a spouse, as anybody, like these things are real and they're getting worse. So like the audit component of like, how do I make myself relevant? Like my kids are having fun. Like sometimes you got to be disciplinarian, but if you're trying to have fun, like how do you make it engaging and actually use 360 feedback in real time? And it's really easy nowadays. If people are disengaged, they're on their phones or they're listening to something. So it's this is how it makes its way into an insignificant baseball league, but there's so many incredible lessons that we can put in front of ourselves to make ourselves way more relevant and connect.
Yeah, at one point, Jeff Bezos used to do this with Amazon when they were trying to fix their customer service. We talked about this in the Everything Store when we read that book. Do you remember when he was saying, we're getting really bad customer reviews? What's the wait time for people calling in to the help desk? And the one guy was like, "That's like a minute and a half." And he was like, "That doesn't make sense. Like we're getting crushed on these surveys." So he's like, "What's the number?" And he called the number and they were still waiting like 12 minutes later in front of the group. He's just staring at the guy. The guy was gone the next week. He was out, the guy running customer service. But what Bezos was doing is the same thing Jesse Cole was. At what point are people tuning out? At what point are they tuning out and we're boring them and you're making them wait? Take the friction out of the process. But as a manager, you're doing the same thing. If you are seeing that your people are disengaged in a meeting, you don't have to keep doing that meeting. You can do things like Jesse did. Hey, baseball games are taking 3.5 hours. Nope, 2-hour time limit. How do we squeeze it? You can do the same with your meeting. Listen, hard stop, 30 minutes. We're in and out, check in, check out. If that many people are disengaged, your meeting sucks. Kill it, revamp it, change it, or go look at all the sections where people aren't engaging with each other and create other ways to get your information.
So we're going to get into Major League Baseball in a minute, so I'll avoid it. I want to go into some other stuff. So what I think is really unique about the Savannah Bananas is they are both their laboratory and they're actually the implementation place, right? So there's usually a lab and then there's like a showcase. So Ian, if I was going to ask you what has been the most influential influence on the NFL in the past 50 years, what would you say it is?
The AFL.
I was going to say the XFL. So the XFL is the one that was owned by WWE. Now, why did you call it AFL?
AFL was before the XFL. There was an AFC, and the AFL was the competitor to the original NFL. It's when they passed more. They changed a lot of the rules. They changed the whole game.
Sure. So the AFL actually predates 75, right? Which is 50 years ago. So but we both, it's interesting. Dates are different, but we have the same exact answer. A competitor, right? The ABA pushed the NBA. The ABA is the league that Dr. J was in, and they had a 3-point contest, a slam dunk contest. They had an all-star weekend. The NBA had none of those things. So what's really unique about the Savannah Bananas is this. They've taken their own product, which they've created because it's a hybrid product of real baseball. There's no standings. It's an event. And they've done something I think that's critical. They have created a closed environment. So this is what Steve Jobs was big at. He wanted a closed environment. Your iPhone has one place you can plug in. It's the charge. That's it. Everything else you have to get off of the phone. Same thing with their computers. But like hobbyists wanted to be able to touch and tweak and do these different things. What they have done with Savannah Bananas is try and buy a ticket on StubHub. It's fucking impossible. You have to go through this process because everybody that wants them clamors for it and they push out all the noise. And not only do they do things like that, they're self-innovating and it's affecting other things. But if I use the NFL specifically, because of the XFL, the NFL has changed its kickoff. It's changed the biggest innovation from the first XFL was that flyover camera, because the WWE was a better television product because it was just a television product. So these competitive upstarts that have nothing to lose, if you're humble enough to say, what do they do great? You can learn from them.
Turns out that was about the only thing the XFL did great, though. So that was part of the problem. They did have He Hate Me, which was really incredible.
So I'll use a better business example here and then on this, on how you, if you're humble enough to learn from your competitors, how you can use it to your advantage, right? So as we've talked about here, I've been a part of multiple masterminds, and most of the masterminds that I'm a part of are the best of the best. So you go to those and it's a lot of the same stuff, but you go to the masterminds where people are doing 10 or 20 deals a year. And what they do is kind of dirty. It kind of requires you to get your elbow, like you got to kind of roll your sleeves up and do a bunch of crap you don't want to do. So I don't want to do it, but I have something that they don't have. I have the ability to scale. So if you are humble enough to say this is working and it's probably something that works, it's grassroots type stuff, how do you then turn that into a system and implement it and make your own business better? Because you have what they don't, which is momentum and scale and people. So there's you can learn if you're humble enough to just open up your ears, you can learn from anybody. And then it comes down to the speed of implementation. And we've used some examples here with like Bezos is clearly really good at it. But those are the things that are constant takeaways. This is my argument to the conversation the parents were having in Vienna a few weeks ago. I think if you continue to innovate and use technology as a human, you are going to outpace AI. You're going to figure out a place. But if you like, I have an intern this summer and I said, tell me how you use AI. Because my dad told me to avoid it. Like, that's a bad decision.
That's bad advice.
Bad. So I was asking the interns like, hey, how do you guys use it? Because I wanted to get smarter because I figured they were doing more. One of my interns uses it. The other one blocks it out. That's the kind of stuff where if you're open-minded to it, like I'm not going to be as good at it as a 20-year-old. But that's the whole point. I can be more relevant than most 50-year-olds because I'm asking 20-year-olds.
Yeah, I like your point about if you want to learn about innovative, don't go study big companies, study the smallest.
That's right.
Because they have to do that to survive. I found it fascinating. David and I have talked about it a lot with our car alarm company. I found it fascinating that Amazon, after they purchased Ring, with all of their resources, you can just imagine the hundreds of engineers they had working on the car alarm when they tried to put one out. They failed and they quit. They pulled the product. They worked on that. I can't imagine how many tens of millions of dollars they put into it to not have a working product, which is wild. And they just gave up on it. They were a little too big, right? They weren't the Amazon of Jeff Bezos days 30 years ago, where he left a seat open in every conference room and said, here's the voice of the customer. They were too big to be innovative. And the Savannah Bananas had nothing to lose. They weren't making money. He had to do these things just to make money. He wasn't copying anyone. You're right. He was innovating because he had this sleepy little town in Savannah playing a sleepy old game, and it was just a bunch of old people that would go there that were retired. And he was like, how do I get families here to spend money? How do I get them to do different things? And MLB has taken some of the best things that Savannah has done. Now they're not going to completely ruin the game, but they've made a bunch of little tweaks to make the game faster. And so Major League Baseball is...
Hey, before we pivot to Major League Baseball, I want to say one more thing to close out the Savannah Bananas. And it's this. You said something that's really critical to me. You don't learn from the big companies. You learn from the small companies. Do you know who invented flight, right? The first people to fly.
The Wright brothers?
Correct. Do you know what their full-time job was?
No.
They were bicycle makers. Do you know what months of the year they actually worked on they worked on the plane 3 months of the year? Do you know what months it was?
No.
The winter, because they were from Ohio. So they were there September, October, November, and into December. And then they would go back to their bicycle shop, Christmas time, sell bicycles and have their bicycle shop. The US government had up to 20 different companies working on this. People being paid tons and tons and tons of money. And once the Wright brothers figured it out, those companies stole the technology and went way further with it because they weren't bicycle makers. They were, the Raytheons of the day. But the innovation came from people who were bicycle makers who looked at it for 3 months of the year. They did it 3 years in a row. They went home, did their primary job for 9 months, and they beat everybody else because they had fresh eyes when they looked at it and they tried new things. So that's the really fascinating thing about it. And we're going to pivot to baseball, but if you look at history, it's constantly the people who are the upstarts or the ones who shake things up are the ones who you don't expect because they look at it a little bit different.
One of the beautiful things of Major League Baseball is tradition. You hear lots of people talk about tradition. There's sacred records, right? There's Babe Ruth's hitting 60 home runs. There's Joe DiMaggio's 56 game hit streak. There's Lou Gehrig's Iron Man streak that was broken. There's a lot of traditions that people, and because those records are so important, Major League Baseball is always reticent to make changes because it will no longer be an apples to apples comparison of the past, right?
I want to say something real quick. The other reason that all the stuff that you said a minute ago is so associated with baseball is because of the time that it was consumed. Baseball was consumed. It started in the 1800s through the 1900s, before radio, before television. We had newspapers and people looked at box scores. So the thing that was really, really important, like the TikTok of the day, was the box score. We've used the story here 1,000 times. Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, they always looked at the other person's box score to see who was winning. Like the box score was the big thing, but that is, the technology has changed.
Yeah. And so, but I find that Major League Baseball over the last 30, 40 years has become a victim of their own traditions, right? The people's viewing preferences have changed, people's attention spans have changed, and Major League Baseball was slow to adapt. And it wasn't the Savannah Bananas that got Major League Baseball to change. It was the NFL, because the NFL took all of their viewers. It took all of their money. Their revenue was a problem. They failed to sign up ESPN for a new contract. The advertisers weren't making the same money. So it was more of an existential crisis that drove them to change. But when you need to change, big companies, where do they go? They go to the small places that are figuring it out, that had to do it, that had to bootstrap their way to fun. And so Major League Baseball, to its credit, and some could say they were forced into it, made some really interesting changes. They put a pitch clock in, right? That's an innovation from basketball. Basketball didn't used to have a shot clock. They created a shot clock. It's a more exciting game. There's more points scored. You have to play more up tempo. Turns out people like seeing people shooting, not a bunch of white dudes holding the ball and passing it 40 times and shooting once and a half, right? The way Naismith wanted it. It was better that way. It was more
Or
exciting.
Gene Hackman.
Gene Hackman, right? Just hold the goddamn ball the whole time. But they put a clock in. You can't step out of the box every single pitch the way, and I know Frank has a little bit of nostalgia because he thinks of Big Papi and his gloves and Nomar before that. You had a lot of Red Sox that were terrible at this. But no one wants to watch you adjust your gloves in between every pitch. And I had friends that did not like the pitch clock. And I remember I went to the opening day of the Washington Nationals, and it was the first game that was done with a pitch clock. And we got out of that game in like 2 hours and 10 minutes. And normally these games take 3 hours and 15, 320. And I was like, that was great. There was nothing wrong with that. It sped it up. The pitchers don't step off. You don't step out of the box. It keeps the game moving. They made the bases a little bit bigger so that you could steal more bases. Now people run more frequently, which is an exciting play. People like to see a base getting stolen, right? Ricky Henderson, Frank and I talk about all the time. He's one of our favorite players. He was amazing. Ricky when you went to a game, you wanted to see Ricky try to steal a base. It was the best.
I didn't show you this one.
Oh, you got a new one. I like it. And so Major League Baseball went in and put a bunch of small changes in, but some of them were considered very big changes to the traditionalists, right? The people that have been watching forever. I know people that are like, I don't like the faster game. I liked it better when, and it's like, okay, but you're adapting. You probably found something else to do. I personally love it. I like it closer. And they went in and they put all these changes, and there were a lot of criticism from their hardcore base, right? And that's usually why people don't change in companies, because their base, well, what if we upset the base? What if we do this? What if we upset the apple cart? Well,
So, go ahead.
so Major League Baseball, after putting these changes in, their attendance was up 9.6% from 22 to 23. Average attendance per game was up to 29,000. That's a 9.1% increase. By 2024, attendance was up another 2%, and 80% of clubs saw higher attendance over the last 2 seasons following the rule changes, right? Viewership on TV up 10.5% in the demographic of 18 to 34-year-olds, which you and I both know that's where your money is in that area. Fan sentiment, 66% have said that the changes made the game more attractive. The approval ratings way up. You can't shift anymore, right? People didn't like that when you could put 4 guys on one side of the infield because your data said that that's the only place the guy hits it. No one wants to watch a ground out. They want to see guys running. They want to see guys trying to beat a throw at the plate, right? They don't want to just see strikeouts and pop outs. So by going and innovating and looking at a smaller business like the Savannah Bananas, who really focused on customers and approval ratings, a big traditional business like Major League Baseball, which is hardcore traditionalists, went and innovated their business to a much more successful outcome. And it's going to lead to more contracts. It's going to, right? It's going to lead to more TV advertising. It's going to lead to more revenue, which leads to even more fan base.
So there's a saying, the NBA invents it, the NFL perfects it, and Major League Baseball makes money on it. And it's a really good saying because it's kind of how things had worked over the time and over the years. So what I've heard and I want to distill out are 3 separate things from what Ian talked about. The first one is, who's your master? Major League Baseball's master are the TV networks. That's who it is. The TV rights is what drives it, because these are businesses owned by billionaires, and that is ultimately what drives it. The New York Yankees had the biggest advantage in the last 25 years until maybe 5 or 8 years ago, because they controlled a television network and gave them their own revenue, and it gave them the ability to kind of like exploit the payroll caps, and it gave them the ability to buy better players, and they were always really good. Now the Dodgers are competing against that because it's a new era and there's been some shifts. But the point I'm driving at here, and I want to start with TV first, the TV networks were driving this. TV networks realize we don't care about people who look at box scores. We care about selling ads. And if we're going to sell ad space, this has got to be a better product. And if it's going to be a better product, we have to do some of the stuff that Ian talked about. They also wanted things that were more marquee. 20 or so years ago, maybe a little longer, the NHL, which is really, really, really niche here in America, started doing outdoor games, and it got viewership. So now what MLB does is they play in the cornfield where the movie, if you build it, where they will come. What is that movie?
Field of Dreams.
Field of Dreams was, right? They do games, like do all kinds of really cool, kind of quirky things to bring in viewership. So the first thing is you got to know who your master is, and they went back to TV. ESPN is in a big shakeup. ESPN's not re-signing them. So it's kind of like, who's going to it's harder now to find baseball than it's ever been. You could have literally just gone to your regular television and always found the game. Now you got to go to apps and YouTube, like all these places. It's crazy because there's been a shakeup, and it matters to the people that own the businesses. Anything to weigh in on there, Ian, with kind of thoughts? Nope. The second one is this. If I was going to ask you what's been the what sport has had the most growth or traction in America over the past 25 to 30 years, what would you say it is?
Ultimate fighting competition.
I would say that's second behind soccer. And the reason I would say soccer is first is soccer is we are a country of immigrants. People are moving here from places where soccer is really important. The EPL, which is English Premier League, and there's other places, that product is in and out in 90 minutes. They innovated the game going on while the commercial is playing. And you can constantly see that, like now this happens with the NFL and it happens with baseball. So the TV product, basketball is over in 2 hours. Football is the monolith. It's 3 or 4 hours long, but college football doesn't have the same power that NFL has. They put rules in place that made their game shorter because they were getting too long. So the point of this is they're looking at national or international trends and saying, I only have X number of time to watch a sporting event. So you've got to tighten it up. And those games that were going 3.5 hours are now 2 hours and 10 minutes. You can take your kids to that game and still get home before bedtime, where in the old days you couldn't. So looking internationally for inputs, I think, is important.
When they figure out a way to squeeze soccer down to a 13-minute game, I might watch. That's what it's going to take for me to be interested in that stupid ass sport.
You're not the person for them, but soccer is the most popular sport in the world. And they learn some things from that. Like, why is it so popular? It's easy to find. It's on certain days of the week. Like that's part of it. The other side of it that I think is critical is this. It's where are you in your business cycle? The Savannah Bananas are an upstart. MLB is not an upstart. It is an old school 150-year-old thing. So how you have inputs in what you do is very different. The Savannah Bananas have been valued at something in the neighborhood of $100 million, which is nuts for a minor league baseball team that doesn't really even have an affiliated league. However, Major League Baseball teams are into the billions. So what you have to pay attention to is very, very different. In addition to that, if you look at like how tickets are sold and how the whole thing happens, they are trying to build an incubation period around the Savannah Bananas. The Savannah Bananas have a spinoff now. There's actually 2 teams touring at any given time instead of just the one. Kind of like if you ever go to Vegas, Cirque du Soleil used to be in one hotel. Now basically every hotel has one of their shows. So it's a different business in a different part of the arc. And they're starting to figure out, like, how do we turn this into something? Major League Baseball has had fans for as long as they can remember, and we're starting to alienate them. Part of the end of a business cycle. The opposite with Savannah Bananas is they protect that person and really figure out how to create a different system and an ecosystem to really pay homage to their fan base. Now, I think Taylor Swift is a really incredible example of someone who is clearly incredibly like brilliant at what she does, but insanely good at business. And she's so good on the business side because the fans all think that she's doing something special for them. And because of that, it gets you a special place. It's hard to stay in that spot, but right now the Savannah Bananas are in that sweet spot, and people who are smart are paying attention to it.
When you innovate, you're always going to alienate some of your core base, right?
100%.
So Nintendo got passed up a little bit by Microsoft because Microsoft Xbox figured out how to go online. Nintendo didn't, and they kept making products for, a console that was already out there because, well, what happens? We're going to make this thing obsolete. Yep, that's what you do when you innovate. You sort of make things obsolete. Frankie, an MLB is a really good example of this. Have you ever heard of Microsoft's NIH? It's a negative slang with Microsoft.
I don't know it.
So not invented here.
Oh, I've not heard of that.
NIH mentality is not invented here. And Microsoft, it was started as slang to rip on them, especially during like the Ballmer years and like late Gates when they were going through it. But think about all the big misses Microsoft had. So there was their mobile operating system. They, that was invented by them. And if you look, they wouldn't partner or adopt early. They wouldn't partner with Android. They wouldn't partner with Google. It pushed Windows Mobile, which you don't even know what that is right now. And, it was close closed source. It wasn't open source to other developers, and everyone else just kind of passed them by on it. Take search engines. They had Bing, right? Whoever used Bing, no one didn't. They did it all themselves. They had a chance to license or partner with Google very early, like early 2000s. They could have had Google on all their phones, but instead they created Bing. They had that, what was the Zune? That was all stuff that they kind of created, and they just let Apple kind of blow by them, and they lost the whole Windows media ecosystem by focusing on Zune, and they were late on it. They missed the chance to go into the cloud. They could have done the cloud. They could have partnered with AWS very early, but instead they wanted to do everything where we'll be on premises. So it was all Windows servers, because the Windows servers made a lot of money. And a lot of their core customers owned Windows servers where you literally put the data center on your site. And AWS was like, don't do that. We'll keep all the servers for you. It's called the cloud. We'll give you all the backup you want, but we'll keep it all. Microsoft didn't do that because they were making a lot of money selling servers to put on people's premise, and they had just sold them a year before. So going and saying, hey, you don't need to do that anymore would piss off some of their big government contracts, all that. What happened? Amazon went and built up like 60% of that market, and Microsoft is still chasing them today, but it was not invented here syndrome, right? The NIH, that hubris, and that's MLB, right? That was MLB forever of, well, it was we invented that part of the business. We're not going to change. We're not going to innovate our own business. It really holds a lot of big companies back. And there's a psychological term for this in organizations, Frankie. It's called learned helplessness. And what learned helplessness is, and I'll try to give you just a basic example. Let's say, Frankie, that one of your employees comes to you and says, Frank, I've got a new idea of something we should change in the way that we take our inbound leads. I really think that if we use software to handle the front end of it and move through it and just had some little idea. And let's say Frank's having a bad day, right? Let's say Frank's annoyed with his sales team. He feels like they're all making excuses. And this person comes in with a creative idea to try to help Frank make more money in his company. And Frank dismisses this person outright and says, maybe we just need to sell better. And he's in a bad mood, right? And he's like, that won't work. It's expensive. We looked at it. Okay. So the person goes back to their cubicle and they're in a pissy mood now. Well, damn, I tried to bring Frank an idea. He's the owner. I thought he would be happy that I brought him an idea, and he just told me I was making an excuse. So this happens. Person goes about their business, and then Frank hires a new salesperson. New salesperson is now in the mix with all of the salespeople. And one day that person over lunch says, wouldn't it be smarter if we automated some of our leads and brought it in, and brings up the same idea? Well, that person who got dismissed from Frankie, what's that person going to say to newbie?
No way. It's never going to happen. They're going to shoot it down.
I tried it. I already tried it once. Frank just said no. Frank just said no. So now the new person is like, now they're kind of defeated. Like, oh, really?
It's a culture of no.
And they don't even try, right? So, but here's where it gets worse. So now, 6 months later, new hire comes in, brings up to the middle person who never even talked to Frank about it, brings up the same idea. Brings up the same idea, even though that second person only heard it secondhand that Frank will say no. What are they going to say? The same thing. No, Frank will just turn it down. He won't do it. Even though they've never tested that themselves. That's learned helplessness. Let's just throw our hands up. And part of the challenge, Frank, that you run into in an organization that I always find when you're trying to get people to innovate, you go to them and you say, hey, we really need to grow our sales a little better. We got to grow our conversions. What are some of your guys' ideas, right, on growing conversions? If we wanted to grow our conversions by 20%, we want to convert 20% better. What do you think? What am I doing that could change that? What are some things that you guys need? Well, here's the thing that's scary about that. When you go ask that question and they give you some ideas and you go do them, now who's accountable? They are, right? So I always find that organizations, when I go to them and say, what are some ideas? What are some changes we should make? They're kind of reticent to give it to you because what if they give me everything? Now I'm accountable. Now it's easier for me to act helpless. Now it's easier for me to act like a victim and say, well, that's not done here. It used to drive our CEO nuts at NVR when he would hear Reston, when someone, because that's where our corporate was. Well, Reston says you can't do that. And he would always be like, give me a name. Who are you talking about? No one around here has even heard what you're talking about. Why are you defeated already? But it just becomes part that's learned helplessness. It becomes part of the culture to say that will never happen here. That won't work. And it all stems from some little sidebar ad hoc conversation where maybe Frank was in a bad mood that day and didn't listen. And I'm picking on you. Frank clearly never does this.
I'm the only one here.
He's
That's
the
fine.
cheeriest son of a bitch I know. He's never in a bad mood. But, you as leaders, as managers, you have to constantly go encourage people to challenge you. You have to constantly encourage people to come up with ideas, and you have to be self-deprecating, and you have to say, listen, we've got problems. I need your ideas, and I need you to challenge me to think differently. And don't assume because I've said no in the past that I would say no today, right? That different markets dictate different responses when people bring to you ideas for innovation and change.
If I was going to ask you to define the word dynamism, how do you define it? Dynamism.
I don't know, but I think I'm pretty dynamic. I
So
would think of myself.
the
Is there a picture of me? I'm incredibly dynamic.
correct. The quality of being characterized by vigorous activity and progress, the theory,
Constant movement.
right? So being dynamic. So what I think, I have two different thoughts here. They're unrelated, but I'm going to utilize them and put them together. But it's this: having the ability to be dynamic is critical. We talked about it with Major League Baseball. We talked about it with the Savannah Bananas. The Savannah Bananas kind of by choice came out dynamic. But sustainability requires some ability to be dynamic. There is a period where Microsoft and what Ian just went through kind of became a little sleepy and they didn't have like the most inventive type of period. But now under their new CEO, they are incredibly well run and they are incredibly dynamic to the new market. But this comes back to something really, really unique. It matters what vertical you're in. If you're in tech, tech is still so new, especially around computers with tech. Like, automobile tech is 150 years old at this point. So computer tech is still new. You need to innovate because that's where the innovation comes from, because people still look at you as the innovative place. Here is an example of being the opposite of innovative. We just reposted the interview from when Ian and I went to Omaha a couple of years ago. We went to Omaha the first time and the second time, and the things that the old codgers were talking about, Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett, or Costco and Apple, as uninnovative as anything can be, because their business does not require innovation. Their business requires yields and returns and paying attention to things that other people aren't thinking about. But it doesn't require dynamic. They tell you point blank, we don't invest in Tesla. We don't invest in Amazon. They're inventive. They're dynamic. We don't understand them. These are companies we understand, because that's what they're chasing after, is a yield that they can measure and kind of be predictive with. They're not looking at innovative. But if you are looking to beat AI, to stay relevant, to be a good manager, to be somebody who makes its way through a company and gets promoted, dynamic is incredible. Dynamic is keeping people's attention. It's changing your pitch. It's not letting someone tell you, hey, there's learned helplessness here. Hold on a minute. There's valor in this. I've seen an ability to pitch this. Maybe your pitch sucked. Maybe you need to come back to it and do it a different way. The other thing that I can tell you as the owner of a business and a leader of people, people often tell me, they're like, you should really let people set the table and kind of do their own stuff. I'm like, okay, I should. You're right. So I'll do that. Hey, who did this? Or what are your thoughts? How do you do it? And it fails. So the point is, like, you have to be able to do a little bit of both and constantly have different pitches in how you look at things, how you manage things, how you work your way through the system, how you hold people accountable. It can't be the same all the time. what it comes down to in the end is paying attention to the engagement you have with the people that need to be engaged with. And then how do you get around it and create? So I'll tell you one last little story from this morning. 2 years ago, an average month, we would go on somewhere between 100 and 150 appointments. 150, it's a lot for a company like ours. Last month, we went on 55. 44 people actually showed up. 1/4 as many as were going through a couple years ago. So it's scary in many ways. So what we've gotten really good at is going on better appointments and converting more.
You convert higher.
Way higher. So almost
less
2x
activity.
what we used to do. But at the same time, 55 appointments in a month
Yeah, scary.
with 16 people is not enough.
Yeah.
So the conversation we are having today is, what are you hearing in living rooms? What's going on? What do people tell you? Like, we went through and did, like, turned into a whole hour of time dedicated to what don't people have? And what people don't have in our market is they don't know where they're going to go. They're fearful of money, and they don't think anyone's looking out for them. Those are the big three things. Those are different than the motivators from 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So I was asking, I'm like, I sense frustration. What is it? And it came up with, I don't know if we have the right message. But the reason is we have a culture where we don't do learned helplessness. We talk. I can pay attention to people because I talk to them every day and I get them to tell me what's going on. And I also see my business and can read the tea leaves. So it's a little bit of using all of these skills and things that you're learning from non-relateds like Charlie Munger and MLB. But if you're paying attention to inputs over time, you get good at kind of sifting through the data and coming up with something that you can utilize. And then it's up to you to just make the right change.
You got me thinking a little bit about, someone coming to you and saying, just change everything. Frank, you've been running your business now for 16 years. 16 years. So there are some certain things that Frank is very open to changing, like a message, like a pitch, like where you advertise. But when someone comes to Frank with no substantial information and wants him to shake something up that he has battle tested for 15 years, tweaked, optimized, done a lot of those things, Frank smartly is going to say, let's test it and show me. If you show me it's better than what I'm currently doing, great. In mechanical engineering, Frank, one of the biggest weed out classes, one of the first classes you take, it's a physics related in physics and calculus, really. It's a class called statics and dynamics. So you bring up dynamism. Yes, I think of Ian Mathews, but I also think of statics and dynamics right away. And statics is the study of objects at rest. So where there's equilibrium, where the forces equal each other out. So think of a bridge. I don't think of a bridge and hope it's dynamic. I like a static bridge. I like a bridge that can handle up to, tons and tons and tons of force being applied on it with wind, and there is equilibrium. That's the study of what are the physics behind keeping that bridge from collapsing under its own weight. It's a civil engineering concept too. Dynamics is bodies in motion. So think about rockets, think about cars, think about any kind of an object that is subject to acceleration and force and movement. And I think you can't just be a dynamic company. There are certain things in Frank's business that I want to be like a bridge. There are certain things that I don't want moving too much. There are certain processes that you do that I think are way ahead of your competition, but they are ahead of your competition because you've been going and studying other businesses like yours for 15 years and taking the best ideas. So you have tweaked and changed, and just like a bridge is kind of constantly readjusting under its own weight and moving, that I want to be static. I don't want to just flip everything Frank does on its head. But when your leads drop by 60%, now you are like MLB, losing business and losing advertisers. You're forced into sitting down with everyone and saying, all right, I'm not going to have so much hubris to say that my process is the greatest. The results say that we got to go tweak this, change it. What's the message? What do we need to do different to adapt? Now you need to be dynamic. Does Frank need to go change other areas of his business where once he's closing it, he's still making a lot of profit? No, those should be relatively static. But it sounds to me like the front end of your process, your conversion, your sales tactics and process needs to be dynamic. So there's, I'm going off on a bit of a nerdy, wonky tangent, but I do think that there is some static and some dynamic that's necessary, even in a small business like Frank's, right? That would apply also to the biggest of companies like an Amazon.
So static in my business is rents. We own roughly 300 rentals, pretty static. We collect 97.5 cents on the dollar every single month. I can look at that and I can control, and if the market goes to hell in a handbasket, that business sustains, right? The business looks a little bit different on staffing, but the business works from my perspective as an owner because I built that kind of that static piece. But then the outreach pieces change. But this is the whole thing we talked about last week with the episode with real estate and like where the market is. And I'll come back to this. Like I'm going to call Ian later today and talk to him about something because I think there's an incredible opportunity because the market just shifted. But what the market didn't do is create me go open a car wash or a vacuum company. Like it's not that. It's single family real estate in Richmond, Virginia, because that's what I'm good at. So if you ask me to jump 5 or 6 rungs away, I'm not going to do it because I know I don't have an advantage. I'll give you 2 other things I'm thinking about right now. One of them, I'm not going to do anymore. I'm not great at commercial. So if I'm going to do commercial, I'm going to hire somebody to do the whole thing, pay the premium, because in the end, I'm going to get a better return. I was having this conversation with my wife and I was like, we suck at it. It's not the same. It's not the same subs. It's not the same process. We suck at it. Yeah. I don't want to fucking do it anymore. We suck at it. So if I want to own something, I'm going to hire somebody and I will pay the fee because my buying will allow me to get in at a low enough number that I'm not going to get ruined by paying a fee to a contractor. But on the other side of it is market's getting tighter. I have to get multiple bites at the apple. How do we do it? I've had a conversation with 3 different lenders about becoming an affiliate lender. And I think we can offer better terms than they're currently getting from their market share. So what I now do is I control 30 houses every single month. If I can lend on 50% of those, and I think I probably could, that's another place to make revenue that's really, really, really tight. I have a guy that used to be a loan officer who works for me. Perfect. Can he process 5 loans a month kind of on the side and see if we can build something there? I think he can. We're going on 55 appointments as a company. We got time. So like those are the kind of things that you start to put in place.
Yeah.
And you look at like, okay, this is how we can be innovative. In addition to that, this will be my closer. Where are we in the cycle? I talked about this last week. Governments incentivized buying of property. There is a New York Times, I know it's the liberal rag, but it literally says right here, it says how the housing crisis warped the American dream. And it's an entire article. It's a magazine. I haven't read the whole thing yet, but the moral of the story is it got so low that people came in and bought and turned the American dream into a business. So we had to stop the hemorrhaging and fix that piece. But what's happened is the overcorrection is now things are overly expensive. People can't move. So now it's coming down to governments are letting you build smaller, tighter units that are more affordable because now your problem is affordability. So these are the things where inside of one specific vertical, you can still have dynamic ways of solving your problem and staying relevant.
I don't think I have a lot more to add to it. That was a fantastic capper. You're not the best color man in the business for nothing, brother.
I agree.
I look forward to you calling me later. I just hope you don't ask me to get him back involved in the lending business. That business sucked. I'm tired of it.
No.
Hopefully it's something totally different than that.
Completely. All right. I think this is a good episode. Thank you all. Ian, I'll let you wrap us up, but I have to tell you something offline.
Yep. We are the most dynamic duo in the business, folks, of podcasting. If you're not following, you click that follow button. Don't forget to send us a little review and say hi to us in the review. See you, Frankie.
See you, Ian.
If you like what you just heard, and judging by the viewership numbers, you did, hit that follow button and leave us a 5-star review. It helps other people find the show. It lets Frankie and I know that, a few people are listening to this.